stuff up here today. Yeah, good stuff. Preacher should know. You know you got that rolling bass. See, I love good songs. My background is out of singing and songs, so I always appreciate it. How y'all doing?
Good.
Good.
All right, good. If we will, I'm going to settle ourselves eventually at Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Eventually settle ourselves at Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And for the sake of context, we'll start at verse number 6 and read through the end of the chapter, although I'll probably only deal with the last couple of verses. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loose, the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-given nails given by one shepherd. Further, my son, be admonished by these, or making many books, there is no end. And much study is wearisome to the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Today, our title will be The Nitty-Gritty. The nitty-gritty. It sounds funny when you try to say that properly. You just have to say the nitty-gritty. But I was thinking about trying to look up the expression nitty-gritty. And I never did, because I'm not sure where it came from. But when we talk about the nitty-gritty, we all kind of understand what we mean. When we talk about the nitty-gritty, we're talking about the main idea. We're talking about where the rubber meets the road. We're talking about that thing. We're talking about that thing, that key point, that key element. I want us to consider that in the context of Ecclesiastes, I'm going to get to it in a minute, the writer is talking about life. And vanity is a theme that he continues to talk about throughout the entire book. He talks about vanity. The vanity of this, the vanity of that. And so at the time that he finally gets to the end, he's getting to the meaning of life. And the reason why I looked at this today was because I just think there are a lot of people who are right now trying to figure out what is this all about. I look at the headlines, and the headlines are not encouraging. If you have the TV on when you wake up in the morning on the news station, a lot of times it'll make you just want to turn back over and go back to bed. Try it later on. That's what happens sometimes. Sometimes the news is so depressing. And then you wake up and you go out and you find that we have more questions right now than answers. We have more problems right now than solutions. And so when people are suffering, when people are having issues, a lot of times it lends itself to reflection. And you start trying to figure out, what is this all about? What am I really trying to get accomplished here? What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? So I believe that Solomon, in this particular text, gives us the whole meaning of why we're here. And if we really understand Solomon, if we really look at him, we'll find that although he was an ancient writer, although he was an inspired writer, we'll find that his problems and his concerns and his experiences are much like ours. So I believe that if the problem is much like ours, the solution is much like ours. If the question is much like ours, then the answer should also work for us. When I look at this particular book, of course, we're looking at the end. And if you think about Solomon, he was a man who in his youth asked for wisdom. God said to him, I will give you what you want. I'll give you what you ask. Ask of me what you want, I'll give it to you. Solomon could have asked for anything. He asked for wisdom. He asked for wisdom. He was given that wisdom. You see his wisdom displayed. You see good things start to happen for Solomon. Solomon gets carried away somewhat. Solomon, in all his wealth and all his wisdom, acquires some 700 wives, acquires some 300 concubines. And of course, the things that I have read, you can find in Kings and Chronicles and those things, those books, things that I've referred to. Solomon, because of his wives, he was told, of course, not to intermarry. People pervert these scriptures, but the intermarrying that was done was to foreign women. And the issue there, when you go back, was not necessarily their skin color, but their religious convictions. And because of their religious conviction and their history, they took Solomon's heart away from God. So in the Bible, that's what was talked about when you talk about foreign wives. So Solomon, if you go back and read his history, you find that we wound up with a divided kingdom after that. You find out that we had trouble after that among the people of God. Solomon, by the time he writes Ecclesiastes, because it's thought that he wrote Songs of Solomon when he was a young man. It's thought that he wrote Proverbs kind of in his middle years, and that he wrote Ecclesiastes as perhaps an older man. By the time he got older, he really had started to figure this thing out. You hope. You know, people always say hindsight is 20/20. You hope hindsight is 20/20. You hope that as you go through things, you start to figure out some things. Amen. Amen. Right. Because you don't want to go through these. But go back to the beginning of the book, if you will. Back to Ecclesiastes, chapter 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. I'm in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2. Now verse 3. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? That's what he's looking at. You know, what has all of this gotten me? I've worked, I've been rich, I've done a lot of things, but what profit? What profit is it? You look around, you ever notice how a lot of times famous folks seem to be some of the most unhappy people? And then we look at them and try to figure out, man, if I had all of that stuff, I think I could be happy. I think if I had all of that money, all that notoriety, I could be happy. But the meaning of life a lot of times still eludes them. And Solomon is looking at that, and he's like, one generation passes away, another one comes. The earth abides forever. There's some preaching in there. That verse is messed up a lot of places. The sun rises. The sun also goes down. And he talks about all these things. And then we go to, if we look toward the end of the chapter, verse number 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I set my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men, by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. So he's looking at this thing, and he says, you know what? I'm not finding what I'm looking for in this life. Have you ever tried to catch the wind? He says, grasping for the wind. How many people think you can catch the wind? You know, Muhammad Ali used to say that he could turn off the light switch and be asleep by the time it got dark. You know, now that's fast. But I want you to know that not even Muhammad Ali, not even Cassius Clay, young Muhammad Ali, could catch the wind. Grasping at the wind. And that's what a lot of times what we're doing in this life. We're grasping at the wind. We're catching something that can't be caught. You know, time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. That's a song. And you know, it talks about how just this particular life, it's not going to last. Build your hopes on things that are eternal. This is what Solomon is talking about. Throughout his search for meaning and pleasure, he looks at the vanity of pleasure. He sees the vanity in chapter 2 of industry and labor. You know, a lot of times we think we're going to get the success or the happiness from what we do for a living. And you know what? I think some careers are great, and it's good when you find that thing that makes you happy, that you do well, that you can earn a good living from. But if you're looking for the meaning of life in your job, you're grasping at the wind. You're not going to find it. At the end of the day, you're going to find out at some point it was a job. It was a job. And you know what? And when they're tired of you there, they're going to ask you to leave. Amen. And it's going to go on without you. You know, I remember losing a job. And people said, well, you lost your job. I said, no, I didn't lose it. I know where it is. They just won't give it to me. It's just not mine anymore. But you know, my whole personality was in that job. And you have to redefine yourself after you've lost that job. I like going through this particular book. There's just a lot of wisdom here in Ecclesiastes. I go to 2 and 4. I'm not going to read all of this book, but I just want to give you a sense of what he was talking about, and we'll go back to the conclusion. I said, Ecclesiastes 2 and 4, make my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. And I'm reading this stuff because a lot of us are seeking after all that stuff. And I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. And I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants, and have servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the special treasures of kings of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. This was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and all the labor which I had toiled, and indeed, it was vanity in grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. You know what he figured out? That all that stuff he did was still going to end him in a pine box. His end was going to be the same as the foolish person. He was going to be buried in a tomb. It'd be a nice tomb because he was the king. But bottom line is, he was still going to be buried. When you run a race, you ought to run it to win. And what you're running for, what you're striving for, ought to be worth it. You believe that? Mm-hmm. What he's saying is, I don't think he's suicidal or despondent or anything like that. Well, I think what he's saying is he's learned how to put things in perspective. He's learned, and see, I'm saying this because as some of these things are taken away from us, I think that God is showing us that we've got too much dependence on material things.
That's right.
I think he's telling us that, you know what, too much of your happiness is based on what you've got in your pocket, what you've got in the bank, what you've got in your house, and not on your relationship with me. You ever lose something and realize how much stuff you have? You ever lose and realize how much stuff you have? People, we are a blessed nation. We're struggling right now compared to what we've done in the past, but we are a blessed nation. There are nations right now in this world that even with our debt rate, even with our problems and all the stuff we've got going on, they would give their left arm and a child to be in our position. Bottled water? Really? You won't drink water out? Really? You only drink bottled? You know there are people that can't get clean water anywhere? And we'll only drink it if it's bottled? Alex has this thing, he only likes Fiji water now. What is that? He only likes Fiji water. You know, but the kind of stuff, vanity. Vanity. So this is what he's been dealing with in his life. And so when he gets back to our text, if you go back into Ecclesiastes chapter 12, early in the chapter, he's saying, based on all the stuff I'm telling you, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. Solomon was speaking from the perspective of somebody who would allow his life to get off track for a while. And what he's saying is, remember God in your youth. All this other stuff, I've chased after. It wasn't any good. Before the difficult days come and the years draw near, when you say I have no pleasure in them, those days are coming. When you look at verses number 3 and following, he talks about the breakdown of the body. He says, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down and the grinders cease because they're few. Talking about somebody losing their teeth. And those that look through windows grow dim. You know, you get a little older, your eyes start to, you know, I'm being bifocals now. I don't consider myself old, but it's happening. Whether I admit it or not, it's happening. You know, the doors are shut in the street. The sound of grinding is low. And, you know, he continues to talk. And down in verse 5, they're afraid of height. The terrors in the way. The almond tree blossoms. The grasshopper is a bird. The desire fails. The man goes to his eternal home. And the mourners go about the street. So remember your Creator before the cord is loose. He's saying, you know, I've lived this life and it's all been vanity. What I'm saying to you now is go ahead and live your life in perspective. Don't chase after things that I've chased after. Don't do that. It's vanity. Get your life in order now while you were younger, while you're still doing okay. Get yourself in order now. Do it now. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. Well, what is all? All the stuff he's talked about in those 12 chapters is all vanity. Now, what is vanity? Something that's useless. He said, everything that I've done, you're looking at my accomplishments, it was useless. You're looking at my stature, it was useless. It was my wealth, it was useless. It was all nothing. It was all nothing. But I am going to tell you what's important. I'm going to tell you what's important. Moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. See, he didn't get this fun. As he got older and wise and realized that stuff was vanity, he still started using his wisdom to tell people good things. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like gold, they prod in the right direction. The words of scholars are like well-driven nails. Maybe they stabilize you, given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Let us get to the nitty-gritty. Let us get to it. You want to know what this whole thing is about? I always have this thing, you want to know what the secret of life is? I'll tell you the secret of life. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. Do you hear that? Fear God. Respect God. Hold God in awe. I want us to understand that that is a dying concept right now. As I write about why people are leaving the church, one of the things I have to write about is that the mindset of the modern mindset has shifted. It doesn't necessarily hold God in awe anymore. It holds man in awe. It holds a quest for knowledge, even enlightenment. Those things. It holds self-realization, self-actualization as the number one thing. It doesn't hold God in awe or in reverence. Fear God. That's the first thing. Respect God. It's first. Let God be your measuring stick. Let God be your gauge. Let God be your light, path, lamp, feet, all that kind of stuff. Let God be that. Fear God. That's what it means. Hold God first. But what's the next thing? The next thing is keep his commandments. This is not a mental exercise. This is not lip service toward God. Fear God, keep his commandments. Just like last week, we read out of John. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. You remember we read from 1 John chapter 5. We were talking about the authenticity of love and Christianity. And one of the things we talked about was real love of God, obeying commandments. It's in 1 John. The Bible, if you really read it and rightly divide it, it doesn't contradict itself. It's the same message. The whole duty of man, fear God, keep his commandments. This is man's all. Oh, now that's if I had not said a word today and it just said that, and if you leave here today with nothing else but this is man's all, then I've done something good today. Because a lot of times we relegate our relationship with God to, we get it in where we fit it in. We get it in where we fit it in. But this is man's all. This is man's all. I read a sign, church sign, that said, it was funny, God wants full custody, not weekend visits. That's what he wants. He wants full custody. He wants all. Now, to give God all, that means we've got to trust him. We've got to trust him that if I give him all, he knows what to do with it. And that my life will not lose something. The only reason I won't give somebody something is I don't like what they're going to do with it. I don't trust what they're going to do with it. But if I give God the way I deal with my wife, the way I deal with Andrea, if I deal with Andrea the way God says so, I have to trust that thing's going to work out. And what happens a lot of times in our marriages is, I trust God, but I'm gonna hold on to this. Why? Because I believe me more than I believe God. That's not right. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is man's all. He wants everything. He wants it all. He wants all of our will, all of our, all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. People need to hear that today. People need to understand that this movement to get away from God, this movement, whether it's humanism or whatever, to get away from God, to have religion in this box that doesn't affect human life and human action, is not a biblical idea. And I fight it wherever I see it, because it's not a biblical idea. You can't separate your faith from what you do. Not biblically. For God will bring every work into judgment. He's going to look at it all, including every secret thing. You mean that? Yeah, that too. That thing that you thought that only you and the Lord knew about, well, you're right. You and the Lord know about it. It's going to come up again. Oh, boy. It got quiet in here. It scares me. I'm glad for the relationship we have with Jesus. I'm glad that when he looks at these things, there's something called grace. I'm glad that when he looks at these things for the child of God, that there's a way of wiping my slate clean. Because let me tell you, otherwise, my slate is dirty. I'm pretty good. I'm better than I used to be. But even on my best day, I'm not good enough. Not left to myself. No, sir. No, ma'am. No. We've got to stand before God. If you will, and I know I'm about out of time, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I think I'll give the Apostle Paul the last word today.
You never had time, preacher.
All right. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Hopefully I don't pass it again. The other day I kept passing over and I kept having to tell myself, Eli's right after 1 Corinthians. All right. It happens to be two. Amen. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Starting at verse number 1. For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. I want to give us the other side of what he was talking about. See, Paul's agreeing with Solomon's message. Yes, all of that stuff is vanity, but now this is what's worthwhile. This is what's lasting. This is how you build your hopes on things eternal. Yes, our earthly house, this tent, is being destroyed. So putting everything that you have into this earthly house is vanity. He's agreeing with the message that was put forth by Solomon. But we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed with our habitation which is from heaven. If indeed, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life. So we're looking for something. We're looking for an eternal purpose. We're looking for that thing. Now he who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who also has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we are always confident. Are you always confident? We should be confident. He says, so we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and be present with the Lord. Therefore, if we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well pleasing to him, once again, talking about keeping his commandments. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. So, I've read enough today. You can read more on your own this week. It is my prayer that as we submit this lesson for your review, for your consideration, that you really consider the nitty-gritty, that you really consider that this life is not the end of it. Have the best life that you can. I'm not saying to neglect this life. Have the best life that you can, but understand that for the Christian, this is not it. We've got something better. And so the something better means we need to fear God. Keep his commandments. Let's not make the mistakes that Solomon made. Your parents ever tell you, son, I don't want you to make, a daughter, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made? You ever hear that? Now that you're parents, do you ever say that to your kids? I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I. And then you try, you sit down with them, and you get them, and you captive audience, and you try to. Priscilla used to do this to me. She used to hold my head and say, "Talk to me," when she was a baby. So you ever talk to your kid? You just sit there with them, and you just, please, I did this, I did this, I did this. Don't do this. This doesn't work. You ever do that? This doesn't work. This will lead you to a bad place. Don't do that. That's what Solomon's doing here. That's what Solomon's doing. So now, this is what God's doing through Solomon, through the Bible. If you get frustrated by your kids not listening to you, imagine how God feels with us. If you're here today, not a Christian, heard the word, ready to believe it. Are you ready to do more than hear and believe? Are you ready to do more than say Jesus Christ is the Son of God? That's good now. It's good to believe that because that's the truth. Jesus Christ, the Messiah. That's true. Are you ready to change your life because of it? Are you ready to you were living one life, but now you're ready to fear God and keep his commandments. I'm ready to accept Jesus as Lord. If you're ready to do that, if you're ready to confess him, if you're ready to be baptized in water for the remission of your sins, you can do that today. If you're here today and you're already a Christian, but maybe your life has been lacking meaning because you've been grasping for the wind. You've been grasping for things, trying to catch things that can't be caught. There used to be a country song saying, look for love in all the wrong places. Maybe you're looking for happiness in all the wrong places. You're looking for meaning in all the wrong places. Come back. Reorder your life. Do what the prophet, what the preacher was saying. This is man's all. If you're subject to the call, let it be known now. Together we stand and sing the song of encouragement.
Yes,